Hi, everybody. Thought I would do a short video to go through the script that would be not the ideal, but a very good script for in-class quiz 8. And along the way, I have some little mistakes or issues that I will try to point out so that you can improve your script, especially for the final project. So here's the RMD script that we will knit into a report. And notice at the top we have our YAML, the YAML, and I've given it a more informative title to improve our coding and nice reports. Let's call it something like that. And then after a colon, it's usually nice to capitalize. Yeah. So uh, that's our YAML. Then our first code chunk. Now, we put the code check option of include equals false so that nothing comes, no commentaries, messages from the loading the packages come out or from loading the data set. We don't want to get that junk in our report. So we have include equals false, the most general code chunk option so that nothing appears. Our second code chunk now, normally here we would have the introduction, and I suggest that you have three hashtags. That produces a nice font size, and then you'd have, your introduction to this whatever it is that you're doing. Always put a blank space before and after the written part, so that it doesn't wrap around any images or things that come out in the knitted report. Our next code chunk starts here. We haven't named it. Remember, the one rule of naming code chunks is that you can't use the same name twice. Here, we're just not bothering to name them. If you have a long script, you name the code chunk so that when the error message comes, you can easily see which code chunk produces the error. Notice all the options we have in the code chunk: echo equals false, warning equals false, message equals false, and comment equal NA. These are all very good code chunk options to include for a nice clean report that does not include the code. We don't want the code in our reports. Now we have a ggplot, a scatter plot of training hours on the x-axis and time observed on the y-axis. Notice that we give our plot a title, and titles should always be figure 1, figure 2, figure 3 with a colon, and then the title. I really don't like the VS title, versus training hours versus skier time. I think a more descriptive and informative title is more useful. So I want to encourage you to use that as the best practice for this class. And we also have labels for the x-axis and the y-axis. So if we we can run the little code chunk to read in the data, and then we can take a look, run this little code chunk and just get an idea. And it looks pretty good. Nice and clean graph. Maybe the dots here are a little too big. Let's try it with size equals 3. Yeah, that's a little better. We don't need the dots so big. So this looks good. So it's a nice clean report. Notice that the theme that produces this is BW. We can also use theme classic. And let's see the difference there. See, notice how the difference there is that all the grid lines got taken out. It's a aesthetic preference, whether you like the grid lines or not. I tend to prefer sort of a minimal use of grid lines. So theme BW is probably what I would go with. So that's our first scatter plot. Then normally we would have some text uh, after this scatter plot or before it that refers to figure 1. So the reason to label it with figure 1 is that then you can refer to it by figure 1. Then we have figure 2, and we'll change the size to be 3. So figure 2 is the talent reduces skier time. So there we go. Nice, clean figure, no gray background, pretty good. Then we have figure 3. And so again, we'll put size equals 3 here. And this is the relationship between talent and training hours. Notice that I call it figure 3. Talent and training hours are correlated. And there we go. Nice graph. Now notice if I close this, X this window, notice here I didn't include any white space between the two. Normally I want to make sure that I have white space between the code chunks. For one thing, just to, as a way of checking to make sure I don't have errors there. Now we have our regression analysis, and notice that I forgot to include the code chunk options. So if I knit this, we're going to see what happens. We'll take our time and do the knitting. Because I didn't include any code chunk options, it's going to doesn't have equals false. It's going to give me the knitting. It's going to give me a bunch of warnings. Just doesn't look terrible. I mean, it does look terrible. So we don't want that. We want to make sure we have the code chunk options there. So I'll go up and grab them from the earlier one and just triple click there. And then I'll paste them over here. Since I'm not naming it, I can just paste it, and I'll paste it over in this one too. So now we have code chunk options. And so our three regressions, pretty straightforward, R1, R2, R3. And then notice how when I gather the three regression results into a list, I give each one a name. Um, and the syntax is the name, that the label that you want to appear in the column first, and then the regression object. The regression object, remember, has been assigned here. Um, so then when I do my model summary command, each column will have a label. I don't want the labels to be too long. These are already almost too long, but because there's just three, that'll work. Notice the options in my model summary command. I have stars equals true as the option. For the title, I tell it this should be table one. This is the first table of this report. Um, the table here says what the table shows. The table illustrates omitted variable bias with the three regression results. Notice that I specify which goodness of fit measures to include, just the number of observations, the R square and the adjusted R square. We could also include the joint hypothesis for all the that all the coefficients are equal to zero. The F statistic for that, I forget what the option is for that. That's one thing you could include. Maybe if I have some coefficients with zero coefficients, I'll increase the number of decimals so that if it's 0.001, that would be rounded to 0.00, which wouldn't be very informative. But at three decimal places, I'd see that at 0.001. And then below this, I have some text, which is self-explanatory for this. So I think we're ready to go now, and let's go ahead and knit it and see whether, our report is reasonable. Of course, there's a lot more we can do, especially in the text. I haven't done any of the text or just a little bit of text for this. So there's our regression results table. Looks good. Notice it just has the goodness of fit measures that we wanted. Text comes out below the table, not starting sideways next to the table. Our three images are there. Our introduction, here's the font size for the introduction, pretty reasonable. Could also do the introduction in bold and not a larger font size. There's an easy way to do that. And I think that's good.